This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome in, folks, to another edition of Open Mic Night. I am your host, Noah Taluki. And on today's episode, the Lions hire Ben Johnson officially as their offensive coordinator for the 2022 season and beyond. I'll talk a little bit about that. And also later on in the program, we have a special guest, Coach Bill Sheridan, who was the linebackers coach for the Lions from 2014 to 2017 and the current defensive line coach at the Air Force Academy. He'll join us later to talk about his career, some of the highlights, some of the schools that he went to, because he has had a tremendous football life, and he's worked for many different famous coaches and even won a Super Bowl 42 with the Giants as their linebackers coach back in 2008. So beating the undefeated Tom Brady in the Patriots. So I thought it'd be a little bit fitting to talk about that since it's Super Bowl week, and also a lot about his time with the Detroit Lions as well. It was a very good interview, I thought, and really looking forward to airing this later. That's for sure. Hope everyone had a great weekend out there. I know there's in case anyone pays attention to any John Carroll news out there, and you guys know me. I'm a graduate assistant at John Carroll. Love the Blue Streaks. Coach Tom Arth, the former head coach at the University of Akron, who was John Carroll's coach from 2013 to 2016, the head coach. He was also class of 2003, a quarterback for the Blue Streaks, probably the best quarterback in school history, and was able to play in the NFL for a little bit as a practice squad, a backup quarterback for Peyton Manning with the Colts, and a little bit with he played in the old NFL Europa League as well. Played in, I believe, Spain and Germany were the two countries that he was in. So he is officially a pass game, not a coordinator, but like a pass game analyst or a pass game specialist or something like that with the Los Angeles Chargers. Of course, the connection there is that Brandon Staley, the guy I talk a lot about on this podcast, is the head coach who was Arth's defensive coordinator when he was here at John Carroll. So we have another guy that we're continuing the pipeline of Tom Arth back in the NFL after a decade-long absence after he stopped playing. And so the John Carroll Blue Streak pipeline continues. I believe he's the 30th Blue Streak alum who's currently working in the National Football League. So really happy that we continue to get more Blue Streaks in there. And the connection with Staley and Arth, that's for sure. Because I think Arth could be a very good assistant coach somewhere. Just didn't really seem to be head coaching material at the Division I level, as he kind of flamed out at Chattanooga and Akron. But definitely a great head coach for for the Blue Streaks. And going over to the Chargers now, beautiful sunny Los Angeles, California, where the Super Bowl will be this week. Matthew Stafford and Joe Burrow going up against each other at SoFi Stadium. Guys, look, if you're expecting this to be like a Super Bowl preview, a Stafford love fest, no. You guys know where my take is on Stafford. I think the Rams are going to win this game. I'm just going to say it. I really want Matthew Stafford to win this game. I do. And case closed. That's it. I'm not going to go into what the final score is going to be. I'm not going into any of that. A breakdown. No, because I don't think anyone cares. I want Matthew Stafford to win. I want him to prove all the doubters wrong. And I know everyone in Detroit's going to be rallying for him. Too bad there's not more Rams fans out there, because their Super Bowl pep rally seemed to be worse than a high school pep rally when you looked at the videos, whereas Cincinnati's was sold out with 30,000 fans at Paul Brown Stadium. That's an NFL pep rally. This Rams one, worse than high school. Anyways, that's my little thing about the Super Bowl. That'll be only about 2 minutes there. Not going into any more detail about that. But I want to make this a little bit short because we have a long interview with Bill Sheridan, and I think it was really good. And I think he talked a lot. Had some really great points in it as well. But Ben Johnson, the new news that he is officially named as the offensive coordinator for Dan Campbell and company. And look, I've talked about Ben Johnson on this podcast before. The tight ends coach for the last 2 seasons with the Lions, was a quality control coach back in 2019, which means he was kind of a sort of a research guy, maybe breaking down some game film, looking at different packages that other teams run, coverages, all that stuff to help better the offense. So not as much coaching, but he did work more behind the scenes with the film. Then gets promoted to be the tight ends coach. And one of the only coaches that was, or one of the only personnel, I should say, that was retained after Matt Patricia was fired. So obviously the Lions thought something of this guy, that he was very valuable in the room to keep him instead of fire him like they did with everyone else. And as we all know, Anthony Lynn, the offensive coordinator that Dan Campbell hired, was stripped of his play calling duties about midway through the season. After that, Ben Johnson, he does not take over play calling duties. That was Dan Campbell, but Ben Johnson played a bigger role in the pass game. He helped develop more of the plans, and he really had a great relationship with Jared Goff. And really, the offense played better in the second half of the season. And I think, too, looking back, I think it was a credit that the Lions were able to do what they did with Tim Boyle. Now, did he throw some ugly interceptions? Of course. Is Tim Boyle a starting quarterback in the NFL? No. But there were some games where Tim Boyle, in my opinion, was able to manage the game really well and, keep the Lions in the game and not really let it get out of hand. There were some instances like that. And I think part of that has to do with the plan and the scheme and knowing the player's strengths and weaknesses, and I think Ben Johnson was part of that. I'm not saying he was the sole reason, but he was definitely part of that plan and using Tim Boyle to his strengths and weaknesses. It's the same with Jared Goff. If you look at Jared Goff's passing statistics in the second half of the season, they are way better than the first, and he had, I believe, a 108 quarterback rating in the second half of the season. I think a lot of that has to do with, like I said, the scheme, the plan, and, look, you could go with a hotshot offensive coordinator. There was rumors out there that the Lions were going to hire Matt Nagy. I think one beat writer said that it was official that the Lions were going to hire Matt Nagy. I didn't believe that at all. I just did not see Dan Campbell going in that direction. You could have hired a retread. You could have hired someone that has had plenty of experience as an offensive coordinator. You could have even talked to Sean Payton if you wanted to, maybe, as Dan Campbell said he did after he retired from the Saints or stepped away, as we should say. But they decided to keep it in-house. It's obvious that Dan Campbell and company trusts Ben Johnson with the play calls. And this is a former quarterback. Shout out to Matt Baker. We had him on in August. Quarterback coach here at John Carroll. He played with Ben Johnson, quarterback position, at North Carolina. They know each other very, very well. There's another connection. But I'm not upset by this at all. I think a lot of people saw this coming as well. And look, I'm not going to say I'm really, really thrilled because obviously Ben Johnson's unproven. He's only been in the NFL. He's been in the league for 10 years. He was with the Dolphins for, a better part of last decade, but not in that role of being an offensive coordinator. So obviously it's a little bit of a lack of experience, but I think it's one of those things where he's kind of paid his dues. He's 36 now and he's ready to take this on. At least I'm hoping. And is Jared Goff and all them the answer? No, I'm not saying that. But I think if he has a good enough game plan, they'll be able to work, things more schemes in. He knows the personnel. At least from a schematic standpoint, the Lions might be able to know how to use their players better, which ultimately could result in more wins. I'm not saying right away, but I'm saying eventually, maybe in a year or two, we shall see. But I'm not opposed to the hire at all. I'm not very, very thrilled either, but kind of in the middle. I'm fine with Ben Johnson. I don't really have anything bad to say other than the experience part. He does not have an experience of being an offensive coordinator, but everyone has to get their start somewhere. And it's very obvious that the players really, really like him. He has that chemistry with them. And statistically, the pass game did get better once he took over more of the duties of designing the game plan. I don't mind this at all. I think it only helps. I don't think this hurts. But I am worried about the experience, as I am with any new offensive coordinator in the NFL that's never been a coordinator. But I think this was a decision for the better. That's for sure.
And joining us now here on the Open Mic Night podcast is the current defensive line coach at the Air Force Academy and former Detroit Lions linebackers coach from 2014 to 2017, Coach Bill Sheridan. Coach, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Happy to be here, Noah.
All right, so first things first, as soon as I saw, your resume up there, I noticed that, you're a De La Salle grad, Catholic League grad, class of 1977, and you also coached at Shrine High School in Royal Oak for a little bit. Me being a Catholic Leaguer myself, U of D Jesuit High School, how special is it, to be in the Catholic League, to not only play but also coach in it as well?
I shouldn't say was, I still am a super proud Detroit Catholic League alumni, not only from a academic school standpoint, which, all the Catholic schools, provide incredible undergraduate, college prep educations, but just being part of the Detroit Catholic League from a sports standpoint. In high school, I just played football and basketball, but no, even to this day, I'm a super proud Detroit Catholic Leaguer for sure.
And so after Shrine, you coached over there in the early 80s. You move on to become a graduate assistant at the University of Michigan in the mid-'80s with none other than Bo Schembechler as head coach, the legendary head coach for Michigan. And then later on in the early 2000s, you coached at Michigan with Lloyd Carr as well. So what were some things maybe that you learned from both of them that you took forward later in your coaching career?
Well, the opportunity for me to get on as a graduate assistant in 85 and 86 was without a doubt the greatest opportunity I had in regards to me advancing my career. Because at that time, to be on a staff at Michigan with Coach Schembechler, it would be the equivalent of coaching at Alabama right now. It was in the heyday. They were winning Big Ten championships. And Coach Schembechler was, he was a Hall of Fame coach even back then. He was well into the success. He had already been there since 69. And their coaching staff, it was an absolute all-star coaching staff. And without going through every single guy, our defensive coordinator was a guy named Gary Moeller, who was without a doubt one of the finest football coaches I've ever been around, and was fortunate enough to be around him for 2 full seasons during that 85 and 86 season. And every job I've had since has directly or indirectly been related to my experience or the contacts that I made in those 2 years in 85 and 86 at the University of Michigan. And from a learning standpoint, it was, I came in there, I thought I knew something about football, and I realized I didn't know anything about football. But, because they were at, the top of the line in regards to what was going on in major college football from a schematic standpoint and a strategy standpoint, let alone a recruiting standpoint. And, again, we had 2 outstanding seasons, back-to-back bowl games, which I think even after I left there, Michigan had one of the longest bowl streaks in the history of college football. But that experience there was definitely, I grew the most during those 2 years. And again, going forward from there, the context that I made there helped me with at least a dozen of the future jobs that I had.
I want to know too. So you were around Jim Harbaugh when he was a quarterback there. I know you coached, more maybe on the defensive side. But how well did you know Jim Harbaugh when you were there, and how exciting was it this past season that Jim Harbaugh finally leads Michigan to a Big Ten title and the college football playoff?
Yeah, Jim was our quarterback. Those 2 years that I was there were his junior and senior seasons. And he was our quarterback, and he was first team All-American. And the one thing that I think the people that know him would recognize this, but just from a young coach and watching, the team over a calendar year, 2 calendar years, the one thing about Jim, and then this will sound a little bit trite, but he was a fanatical competitor. And I'll give you just one small example. In each summer when the kids came back from, they reported to camp. Now, just like it is in this day and age, the kids were there all summer, going to summer school and working out with Mike Gittleson, who was our strength and conditioning coach, and he was outstanding. And but at the end of the summer, as part of the conditioning test, our guys, they had to run a mile, and for time. And it was based on whether you were a skill player or a big skill player or a lineman. And in the 2 summers I was there, Jim won it. He literally, and he obviously was in good shape, but when they got ready to run that mile test, and it would be like a week before we were getting ready to start preseason practice, he would sprint the mile. And I mean, this guy was a quarterback. He was a skill player, but in his mind, before they even started the race, it was no doubt who was going to win it. And he literally sprinted the mile each of the 2 summers I was there, and he won it. He had the fastest time on the team. And he was the same way every day when he came out to practice. We used to start practice with a 2-lap warm up around the football field. And Jim he just opened up, and he won it every single day in practice, and he wasn't about to let anybody else change that. And, but again, that's just an inkling of the mentality he had as a football player and as a leader. And he was that. And outside of being an outstanding, productive football player, he's, like I say, he was first-team All-American quarterback and played in the NFL. But his competitive nature was fanatical, and it was impressive.
There's times that I feel like when I see him, coaching out there, it just seems like he's in that player mindset. It's just like you were talking about with how he won those strength contests and all that in the 80s as well. But you had a couple stops after Michigan, Maine and Cincinnati, and then went over to Army for 6 seasons from 1992 to 1997. So Army, of course, a service academy, very familiar with Air Force as well, like you're there right now. At all these other stops that you made throughout your coaching career so far, how different is it? Or is it different at all coaching at the service academies than another school?
I think the only thing I will say this, and because I'm coaching at Air Force right now, is it's more similar than it is different. Especially in the football component of it. It's very, very similar to coaching at a civilian school. Obviously, the academy experience is different for the undergraduate students. And the recruitment is different because one is you're allowed to bring in more players. You're not really bound by the 85 scholarship limit or the 25 per year limit because everybody at all the service academies are on a full grant and aid. So it allows you to recruit more and bring in more players each year. That's a recruiting difference. And again, like I said, the academy experience is very unique and different. It is probably more similar than different than going to a civilian school. Basically, these guys are getting an undergraduate bachelor's degree from a 4-year college. They do their officer training during the summers, and obviously, unless they get drafted into the NFL, they're going to be obligated to serve as officers for 5 years after they graduate. And all the service academies are similar in that way. But the day-to-day, year-round football component is really more similar to coaching at a civilian school than it is different. Whether it's off-season conditioning and weightlifting and spring practice and summer conditioning and fall season, in-season practice and game week and meetings and all that stuff. There's really no handicap there, even though you're part of a military service academy. So it really, there's no disadvantages there from a coaching standpoint.
I wonder too, because wasn't there a rule that was made a couple years ago that you could explore sort of like a career in professional sports at after you graduate from a service academy, and then you can postpone your military service to a later date. I don't know if that's changed anything with a little bit more of maybe the recruiting aspect of it, or the coaching at these service academies as well.
What the latest is, from my understanding, is, and it's not like we have 10 guys a year getting drafted, but if you are good enough and capable of being drafted into the National Football League, let's say, you can go directly in. Where decades ago, like in the days of Roger Staubach coming out of the Navy and that, he had to serve first, and then he became an NFL player when he was 26, 27 years of age. Now you can go directly into the NFL, and depending on how long you are in the NFL, they actually view that as that it's like it's time served, in the sense that you're an ambassador. You can do some public relations stuff, talk to high school kids, that kind of things in the off season, and that actually count towards your service years. But that's been new probably in the last 5 years. And there are guys that have done that. They have gone directly in the NFL, and not that time in the NFL, because of the tremendous exposure that it gives to the academies, that actually is counting as time served.
I have a friend a couple years ago that graduated from Army, and every year he went to the Army-Navy game, and he just kept telling me this: there's just something very different about this game compared to other rivalries in college football. You, of course, were part of that Army-Navy game. What is it about that game that just makes it so unique and special throughout college football?
Well, I think two things. One is the length of the rivalry. It's the Air Force Academy, just really started in the late 50s, and where the other two service academies have been going for a long time. And so it's the length of the rivalry. And the other thing I think is, it's always the last game of the regular season prior to any bowl game that they might be going to. So it's always that first or second weekend in December, national television, of course. And historically, they've been very, very, very competitive games. In the last 50 years, it's very rare that there's a game with maybe a 2 touchdown difference in score. They're always very competitive. When I was there, we won 5 in a row against Navy. We lost my last year at Army before I left, but we had won 5 in a row, and every one of them were 24-23, 16-14, a made or missed field goal in the last play of the game. They're always insanely competitive. And you normally, 3 out of every 4 years, you're playing in Philadelphia. Every 4th year, they would open it up to a bidder. So the 2 times we didn't play in Philadelphia, we played in the Meadowlands, where the Giants were playing at that time. So, and they were all sellouts and great crowds. And but I think the length of the rivalry, and the fact that last game of the year and super competitive, regardless of the records that the teams may have had during the regular season.
So after Army, you head over to Michigan State, back to Michigan, and you work under Coach Nick Saban, the legendary coach now at the University of Alabama. How was it to work under Coach Saban? Was it a similar situation to maybe, Bo Sheridan? Of course, he wouldn't have that national prestige then. That came a little bit later, but could you see that, he was just an up and coming coach that, really had a lot of knowledge?
No doubt. Like I mentioned about my initial experience at Michigan as a grad assistant in 85 and 86, I was coming from high school football. I played Division II at Grand Valley for a guy named Jim Harkemon. He had a wonderful coaching staff. And, but again, when I first went to Michigan as a GA, an incredible jump in just football knowledge and football acumen. And it was the same thing when I went to Michigan State. Again, I had coached at Maine and Cincinnati and West Point, and I thought I had a real good grip on football, and I think I did. But when I came into Michigan State, those 2 years working under Nick, there's no doubt that it was an incredible amount of growth. And in hindsight, looking back on it, a period of time that I'm super grateful for, because yes, most definitely. Even back then, and I've told people this before, I think Nick would be good at anything in any profession. He's got a very, very high IQ. He has great leadership abilities, great problem solver, great identifier of talent and things that need to be addressed, super organized. And you could just tell. And he had already had some success for sure, not to the extent that he's had in the last 20 years. But he was definitely an elite person at his job. And it made everybody else around him better. He made you want to be a better coach.
I got to ask you about that 1999 game against Michigan, when it was Michigan, of course, alternating quarterbacks with Drew Henson and Tom Brady. Now, I want to know, how much do you remember that game? And could you, when Brady was playing for Michigan, could you just see anything about any sort of hint at an NFL career later on? Or were you just thinking, maybe this guy is just at the college ranks and that's it?
No, I wouldn't have had any insight into the kind of career he was going to have down the road. Obviously, he was one of the starting quarterbacks at Michigan, so anybody who has that role is going to be a good quarterback at that time. But I remember that game. We were both undefeated. It was I guess now would be the ESPN game day. We were both 6-0. It was in East Lansing. We had a good team. We ended up having a very good team that year. And we were super confident, but again, this is Michigan. So you never take anything for granted when you're playing them. They had recruited elite players, and they were 6-0 coming in as well. But nothing in particular about Tom. And again, like you said, they were splitting time with him and Drew Henson. But we did a good job in the rushing game. I know they didn't rush for 50 yards, and we had a real good lead at halftime, which was kind of shocking. And I remember they came out in the second half, and they went to a lot of 4 wide receivers, and they started throwing the ball all over the park. And they came back, and we only beat them. I'm ballparking, and I think the final score might have been like 35-31. They came back and made it competitive, but it was a little bit out of their mode. They obviously been a good run pass mixed team, but we had the number 1 rushing defense in the Big Ten that year, and we held them to. We might have held them to under 25 yards rushing, but in the second half, Tom came out, and they were they got into what we call 10 personnel, 4 wides, and they were throwing the ball all over the place, and they got back into the game. And the second half, was very lengthy because obviously when you're throwing the ball a lot, the clock's not moving as much. And but yeah, he was. I mean, you could tell he was going to be good back then, but nothing to the extent that he ended up being in his NFL career, not at that point.
Also, I believe you coached Julian Peterson there as well in the late 90s, who had one of the best defensive seasons in Michigan State history that year for sure. So right after Michigan State, a year at Notre Dame, then you go back to Michigan with Lloyd Carr, as we mentioned earlier. And then finally, you get that chance to be an NFL coach. You became the linebackers coach for Tom Coughlin and the New York Giants. I'd love to know, and I've asked some other coaches this too before that I've interviewed, what is the biggest difference between coaching at the college level and coaching at the professional level?
I will say this, not to downplay the question, but in the grand scheme of things, it's far more similar than it's different. I don't believe you really treat or coach your players really much differently at all in the National Football League than you do at the college or even the high school level. The one thing I think I tried to be, I guess, aware, I don't know if I'd call it sensitive to, aware of is, the players are older. Some of these guys are married and have children. A lot of them are, they're just right out of college. They're only 22 or 23 years old. But you do have guys that are 25 or 30 years old, have been in the league for 6-7 years and have children. And so I just think two things. One is you're with the players so much more, not only the length of the season, right? Much, much longer. But you got these guys at 8:00 in the morning every single day during the week. It's not like they're showing up at 2:00 in the afternoon like they do in college. You got these guys at 8:00 in the morning. You're with them in meetings and walkthroughs and practice and post-practice film sessions. So the volume of time that you have face-to-face interaction with these guys is so much greater. I think you have to have a little bit of a civil, even-keeled approach. I don't think you can be a screaming and hollering maniac because you're just around the guys so much. They would turn that off or tune that out. And so, I try to be sensitive to that. It doesn't mean you don't coach and correct and demand anything less. I just think it's your basic demeanor is a little more civil, professional, not soft in any way, shape, or form. But again, like I say, you're just not. I don't think you can afford to be a belligerent, screaming and holler, dog cussing guy. Again, you're talking to 25, 28-year-old men, and for as long as you're around them, you start at the end of July and you go all the way till January. You got these guys 6 days a week, all day. You have to be able to be listened to and have a good relationship that way. A little bit more of a professional, even keeled, relationship. Still demanding, still critical, of the performance and all that stuff. But that's kind of my take on that.
Talk with former Lions linebackers coach Bill Sheridan from 2014 to 2017 on the Open Mic Night podcast. You mentioned the sort of the rough and tumble job of being the coach in terms of the attitude that the coach has to have at the professional ranks. You worked under Tom Coughlin with the Giants, and of course he was known as that ultimate disciplinarian. There's a lot of clips of him screaming and shouting on the field. How did guys buy into that? Because obviously he's won 2 Super Bowls with the Giants. You were with him in Super Bowl 42 for that one win. How was he able to get, especially those older guys like Michael Strahan and those guys that have been around for a while to buy into what he was talking about?
It's a good question. I came in on, I think it was Tom's second year there. So I wasn't there at the very beginning. And I think initially there was probably some subconscious pushback because Tom was a very disciplined coach, very demanding, very organized, very structured, and held the players accountable. I do think at some point, even in that second and third year, he did have some sit downs with some of the veteran players, including, and most importantly, Mike Strahan, who was really the voice of the players in the building. And I think him and Michael came to an understanding. And once Tom had Michael Strahan in his backyard and on his side, Michael took that to the locker room. And, like I say, probably into my second or third year, we had a great team atmosphere. Again, Tom never relented on anything from a disciplinary or a demanding standpoint. But the one thing is, and I think this is true for all coaches, and most of the guys I worked for were excellent in this area. Like Tom himself is an outstanding professional. Like I said, tireless worker, incredibly organized, incredible focus. And the players recognized that. They knew that this guy was all about winning and about player development and about team first. And if you're a real football player, those are things that you want to latch onto. And Tom did a good job of that. And our guys did buy in. And obviously I think the 5 years I was there, we went to the playoffs for the 5 years and won a Super Bowl. And And like I say, the players recognized Tom's approach to it, and they bought into it.
Well, it is. I think it's fitting that it is Super Bowl week this week. Of course, the game on Sunday. So I want to ask you about Super Bowl 42. Of course, you are going up against Tom Brady again, just like we mentioned earlier when he was at the University of Michigan and you were at Michigan State. How did it finally all come together for the Giants? And there wasn't as much expectation at the beginning of the season to win the Super Bowl, and then all of a sudden the team got hot at the right time, and they completed arguably the greatest upset in Super Bowl history against the then undefeated Patriots and Tom Brady. So what was it about that team that just made it all come together?
Good question. They were undefeated, as you know, and we had played them in Week 15 in New York. We were crossed over with that division from the AFC, so we played them in Week 15, and they beat us in New York. I don't remember the exact score of the game, but it was competitive. And I know our players thought, well, if we get in the playoffs, we can definitely play with these guys. It wasn't like they had overwhelmed us or kicked the crap out of us. But we get in as a wild card. But the one thing, kind of like you said, I think we hit our mark. We were playing really well going into the playoffs. We were the number one rushing team in the National Football League. All 5 of our offensive linemen played every single game. We didn't have one injury all season on the offensive line. Eli Manning was a blossoming player at the time. And on defense, like I said, I think as we went into the playoffs, we were super confident. We had played well in the last month of the season. And each week, I know we started off, we beat Tampa, then we had a rematch with Dallas, then we played Green Bay in the conference championship game, and then we went into the Super Bowl. And again, all those were super competitive games. All 3, Tampa, Dallas, and Green Bay was an overtime win for the conference championship. But we went into the game super confident, totally realizing who we were playing against and how good they were and how capable they were. But our guys, again, like you said, we had hit it at the right time. And even prior going into the playoffs, we felt we were playing really good defense at the end of the season and into the playoffs. And offensively, we had always done a great job. Like I said, anytime you have the number one rushing offense in the conference, in the league, that's a great way to control the ball and win. So we had that going for us, and we were able to run the ball even in those first 3 playoff games. So that's kind of how it took place.
So you were after that, a couple years after the Super Bowl, you became defensive coordinator for the Giants for a year, went to Miami for 2 years with the Dolphins, then was the defensive coordinator for the Buccaneers for 2 years. And then you come back to Michigan again and become the linebackers coach for the Detroit Lions. And your first year in 2014, made the playoffs, 11-5 record with Jim Caldwell, and unfortunately lost the playoff game to Dallas. But the one thing about that team that I remember as a fan was that defense and how good Ndamukong Suh was, and the linebacker play with DeAndre Levy was really coming into his own, Stephen Tulloch, and a lot of great players in the defensive backfield as well. What was it about that team that made the defense so great? And probably the best defense the Lions have had, at least in this millennium.
It's a good question. We had great defensive leadership. Our defensive coordinator, a guy named Terrell Austin, who I think he just got named the coordinator in Pittsburgh for the Steelers this past week. So Terrell ran it, and he had been coming in from the Baltimore system. And, I think in the big picture of things, Terrell kept it simple enough. He knew we had quality players at every level. And so we could hang our hat on a few things that we were going to be playing every single week. And, he would tweak whatever we needed to do to, compensate or to attack the team we were playing that particular week. Again, just to throw stats out, we not only had the number one rushing defense in the National Football League that year, I think it was the 9th best rushing defense in the history of the league. And Jim Caldwell had come in and had done a spectacular job about setting the tone. Again, Jim is a very, he's got a ton of excellent qualities. He's a very matter-of-fact guy, can look at something, see what needs to be modified or addressed, had a very positive attitude with our players, but never took any slack. Very, very disciplined coach and demanding on the players, but in a positive, constructive way, nothing derogatory ever. He had a very good demeanor, very, very good game day demeanor. I'm actually shocked over the time since he's left there that he's never gotten any of these head coaching jobs, because he is and would be excellent. So that was, like I said, we had good players, and Terrell did a good job of not screwing them up, and we played to our strengths, which was our front.
There's two players in particular that have always remained a mystery to me at the linebacker position. Two draft picks from your time there, Kyle Van Noy and Jared Davis. Kyle Van Noy, of course, used more as a special teams player with the Lions, but then gets traded to New England and becomes a starter and wins a Super Bowl. And then Jared Davis just never really seemed to pan out at the middle linebacker position. You were their position coach, the linebackers. What was it about them that it just did not work out in Detroit?
That's a good question. Both of them were great
college players,
great guys. Very good professionals, worked hard, very good guys. I think to kind of oversimplify it, Kyle had been a 3-4 outside backer in college, and we played him at that, in the Lions. We were a 4 down, but we played some under, so he would be on the line of scrimmage playing a 9 technique. But, we were trying to morph him into playing an off-the-ball stack position, because that's kind of how we lined up. We played a 4-3. We didn't play a 5-2. And initially, anyways, and I know he played middle linebacker for the Patriots and has done a fantastic job, but, for us, it was a transition period for him. And, in my mind, he probably should have been drafted initially anyways to a 3-4 team, because he could have lined up as a 3-4 outside backer in the NFL. It would have been right up his alley. It was where he had success in college. And like I said, we were trying to, make him a jack of all trades, playing off the ball and on the ball. And we had other good linebacker personnel in that time as well. And so he just never blossomed in our system like he did when he went to New England. And Jared, I was only with Jared for 1 year. But, he had a great pro day back in Florida, and our GM and scouts went down and saw that. He was a fantastic character guy. And this guy had impeccable character and work ethic and toughness. But I think, again, it's just, his initial transition into the NFL with the more extensive passing game, and pass coverage stuff. It was a transition period for him. That's all. And I'm not sure, where he's at in his career right now, as far as, how he's progressed and all that kind of stuff. But again, he was just coming in as a rookie, and a lot of the stuff was just, it would be developmental for him at that point. He wasn't getting the volume of passing attack that you do in regular college football, which is obviously a little more run pass balance.
You talk about Van Noy and how they wanted to make him a jack of all trades. This is a guy that they drafted in the second round. And obviously there's just a lot of news out there about the Lions and the management and all that. I just want to know, of all the other teams that you went to, that you coached for in the NFL, was there just something different about the Lions in terms of management and all that compared to these other teams? Or was it relatively the same, but there was just some other things that went wrong?
No, I don't think there was anything distinctly different in regards to our draft process or evaluating of players or putting together the draft board. I think all those were way more similar than different. As far as the big picture of things and why they have or haven't had the amount of success that, everybody hopes for, I mean, that's a super big, broad question to be asking. And, I couldn't speak to that per se. That's a gigantic, all-encompassing question.
Yeah.
And, the NFL it's super competitive. It's tough, Fortunately and unfortunately, a lot of times you see the same teams getting in and out of the playoffs. And, there's teams that go for some lengths of time and don't get playoff opportunities. But, we went 2 of the 4 years we were there. And I know they haven't had a chance to get back since then, which is very unfortunate when they let Jim go. But, that's a gigantic question. There's probably 15 different answers you could get for that.
For sure. Also, you were with the Dolphins for a couple years, and you worked with Dan Campbell. He was on that staff, the current Lions head coach. Was there anything? And I know he was a little bit earlier in his coaching career, just fresh off of playing. But was there anything that you saw maybe in him that one day he could become an NFL head coach down the stretch, or if can you see, or do you think that he's a coach that could help lead this Lions team now back to the playoffs?
Yeah, I definitely did see that when I was working with him in Miami. And you're right, it was at the beginning of his coaching career because he had just got done playing a few years prior to that. But no, I think super, super highly of Dan, and I think he'll do an excellent job. He had a great demeanor even back then when he was just starting out in his coaching career in the NFL. Like I said, very demanding on the players and yet very professional and very matter of fact and very, very sharp. And I have nothing but good things to say about Dan, and I think he'll end up doing an excellent job in Detroit.
Final question for you, Coach. Now, I've heard a lot of debate over the years about if it's the players that make the team or the scheme. Do you think it's a combination of both, or is it, or like with a team with the Lions who maybe don't have as much talent, at least for right now, is it more so having a better scheme than the other team, or is it you just got to have the talent to win?
Well, I think in priority, better players will win over inferior players, and that's non-negotiable. But there is some scheme to it for sure. That's what the coaches are paid for. And there's also the concept of how you put it together in the building from a team mentality standpoint, and a work ethic and a professionalism and how you approach your job and how you work with your teammates and all that. And that's in particularly important for the head coach at each place. But I do think the number one thing is, teams that have better players win. And the nice thing about the NFL is they try to create tremendous parity with the way they orchestrate the draft and the salary cap and the free agency and all that stuff. So they're trying to make it, everybody gets an equal chance to acquire good players. But there's some teams that do better job putting together their schemes on either side of the ball than others. But a lot of it, too, is, like I said, the team chemistry that's created within the building, because, again, you're around these guys for so much. It's so competitive. The league is so competitive. And, one of the jobs of the staff is to try to get these guys to work together on the same page, work competitively every day, be professional, approach their job with great focus and energy and attention to detail. And so, it's always a combination of that. That's the one thing that makes our game great.
Actually, one last question, Coach. So the Super Bowl this weekend, Bengals versus the Rams. Matthew Stafford, of course, the Rams quarterback, former Lions quarterback. You practiced against him for 4 years. And I don't know what your relationship is like with Matthew, if you still have it to this day or anything, but, are you going to be cheering for him on Sunday and that he finally gets a chance to hopefully win the big one?
Yeah, nobody's a bigger Matthew Stafford fan than I am. I had a good relationship when we were in Detroit. Obviously, we were on the other side of the ball, but there's not a better professional guy in the National Football League, and he's a super talent, and I'm thrilled for him to have this opportunity. Obviously, as long as you've been in, I know a lot of people on the that are affiliated with the Bengals as well, and great people and great men, and thrilled for them to have the same opportunity. And yeah, the game should be outstanding. But yeah, of course, I can't help but be rooting for Matthew. We worked together for 4 years in Detroit.
Absolutely. So, Coach Bill Sheridan, the former Lions linebackers coach from 2014 to 2017, the current defensive line coach at the Air Force Academy. Coach, thank you so much for joining us here. I really appreciate it.
Okay, Noah, good talking to you.
And a big thank you to Coach Bill Sheridan for coming on to the podcast this week. Really, really good talk. A lot of great stuff about pros versus college, working with Nick Saban, Tom Coughlin winning the Super Bowl, upsetting Tom Brady. I really like this story about the 1999 game with Michigan and Michigan State. Tom Brady, asking Michigan asked him basically to dig them out of the hole that Drew Henson dug them in, and nearly came back against MSU and Nick Saban. Both teams were undefeated at that time as well. And a lot of the stories about the Lions. Why was it? And I'm sure a lot of fans out there think the same way. What happened with Kyle Van Noy and Jared Davis? How come they didn't pan out like we thought they would in Detroit? Bill Sheridan was their position coach for both of them, so he knew firsthand, what was going on. I really thought that was a great interview. And being a Catholic League guy, De La Salle grad, and me being a U of D Jesuit grad, it was really, really good there. That's for sure. Make sure to tune into all the other great podcasts on the podcast network. Doc and Jock is always a great podcast to listen to. The original airing every Thursday. The Michigan podcast. I know with the Jim Harbaugh news that he is officially staying. We'll talk a little bit more about that next week. I just wanted to talk more Lions this week since it was the Super Bowl week. And also of course, the fan report. They're talking Pistons struggling. As usual, unfortunately, but hopefully those Cade Cunningham can come back from a little bit of an injury, a little bit of setback, and of course the practice squad and all those other great podcasts as well. Major League Baseball still in that lockout. Hopefully spring training will be starting after they get their negotiations. I want this season to start on time. I think a lot of fans do as well. So we'll keep you updated with that. I'm sure John Macroon and company, and with his brilliant Sports Illustrated coverage and all that as well. Thanks again, folks, for tuning in. And make sure to tune in next week, only on Open Mic Night.